Subscribe for more.
Have you ever felt like your life was perfectly ordinary, only to have it completely turned upside down in an instant? That's what happened to me. It started as any other morning. The sun was just rising, and the kitchen was bathed in soft, golden light. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, looking out at the peaceful street. My house, filled with memories and meaning, was my sanctuary. Everything about it made me feel safe, familiar, and comforting. The white porcelain mug I was holding had belonged to my mother. The furniture, dark wood inherited from my parents, had stories written into every scratch and dent. The family photos lined up on the fireplace mantel captured moments of happiness, and the cream-colored walls that I had painted myself 3 years ago seemed to breathe life into the rooms. I sighed as I took a sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. It was the kind of morning that made me feel like I could just stay there forever, enjoying the quiet and the comfort of my own home. But life doesn't always go according to plan, does it? This morning, something strange happened. It was small at first, almost insignificant. But it would change everything. The upstairs bathroom faucet had started dripping overnight. It wasn't the kind of drip you get from an old faucet. This was different, more like a constant, rhythmic drip that seemed to echo throughout the house. It woke me up several times during the night, keeping me from falling into a deep sleep. It was odd because the bathroom had been renovated just 2 years ago. Michael, my oldest son, had insisted on getting everything replaced, including the plumbing. It had taken a team of workers weeks to complete, and everything had seemed fine since then. But now, here I was, in my kitchen, looking up at the ceiling, and noticing a damp spot slowly spreading. A drop of water fell onto the dining room table every few seconds, a reminder that something was wrong. I dialed Michael's number, hoping he would know what to do. His voice on the other end sounded distant and hurried. "Mom, just call a plumber." "I can't leave work right now," he said quickly, almost as if he was distracted by something else. His tone didn't sound quite right. "But Michael, the bathroom was just renovated. Shouldn't we check the warranty first?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. But his reply was quick and dismissive. No. It's better to call someone else. I'll text you the number of a plumber I know." The way he said it, his words felt off. There was something in his voice that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the first time I had noticed this behavior. Michael had been acting distant lately. He seemed to be coming home later and later, working longer hours, and when he did sit down for dinner, he barely looked at me. It had been a while since we'd had one of those long, meaningful conversations we used to share. He wasn't the only one. Linda, my younger daughter, had moved back home 6 months ago after her divorce. She was 38, but the sadness in her eyes made her look much older. She spent hours locked in her old room, only coming out for brief moments to eat something or grab a drink. She would say she needed time to heal, to find herself, but I could tell she was hiding something. Life, it seemed, had become a series of quiet routines. I would wake up at 6 a.m., make breakfast, clean the house, and watch the news. I'd prepare lunch, but no one would be around to eat it. Dinner was the same, eaten in silence, at the same time every night. I didn't mind it at first. It was a way to fill the emptiness, the quiet. But over time, I began to notice the silence, and it bothered me. My house had become more of a hollow shell than the warm place I once knew. That morning, as I waited for the plumber, I did my best to carry on with the same routine. I cleaned the kitchen, moved furniture around to catch the falling drops from the ceiling, and tried to distract myself from the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound breaking the stillness. Then, exactly 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and standing there was Manuel, the plumber. He was in his 50s, medium height, with graying hair and kind eyes behind glasses. He wore blue overalls, and his toolbox looked old and worn, much like the man himself. There was something about him that instantly made me feel that this would be the right person to fix the problem. "Mrs. Smith, I'm Manuel, the plumber. How can I help?" he asked with a calm, professional voice. I led him to the dining room and showed him the damp spot on the ceiling. His eyes followed the spot, and I could see him frown slightly, his expression thoughtful. "I'll need to check the upstairs bathroom first," Manuel said, "and then I'll need to go down to the basement to look at the main pipes." "Of course, make yourself at home," I replied, stepping back to let him get to work. Manuel moved confidently up the stairs, and I could hear him working in the bathroom for a while. But when he came back down, his expression had changed. He wasn't the same calm, professional plumber anymore. Something had shifted. "I need to check the basement," Manuel said, his voice suddenly more serious. I hesitated. "Do you need me to come with you?" "No," he said quickly. "I can handle it myself. It might take a while." His tone left me uneasy, and I watched him disappear through the kitchen door, down to the basement. The silence that followed was unsettling. All I could hear were the sounds of his tools, metal clanging against metal, faint echoes that seemed to come from far away. At first, I thought it was just my nerves, but as I continued with my cleaning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I poured myself another cup of coffee, hoping it would calm me down. The minutes ticked by, and I sat in my favorite chair, staring at the damp spot on the ceiling, now eerily still. The drip had stopped. Maybe it was fixed already. But why did I feel like there was more to this than just a simple plumbing issue? As I waited, my mind wandered back to Michael and Linda. Was this strange behavior just part of growing up, or was there something more? But I didn't have time to dwell on it. The clock on the wall ticked on, and Manuel's footsteps eventually echoed upstairs. When he came back into the kitchen, he looked at me with an expression I could not place. It was a mix of concern and caution. He paused before speaking. "Mrs. Smith, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Can we sit down for a moment?" My heart started to race. What had he found? What was wrong? And that was the moment when everything changed. But what exactly had Manuel discovered? As I sat across from Manuel, the weight of the moment pressed down on me. His eyes, once calm and professional, now seemed full of worry and hesitation. I could feel the tension building in my chest, and the air in the kitchen suddenly felt thick, heavy. "Mrs. Smith," Manuel began, taking a deep breath, "I've found something that's not a plumbing problem." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. What could he have possibly found? A sinking feeling settled in my stomach, and I felt my pulse quicken. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean? What did you find down there?" Manuel's eyes darted nervously towards the basement door, as if making sure no one else was listening. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Whatever's in your basement, it's not just a leak. It's a system of some kind. And it's connected to your ventilation." My mind was racing. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Connected to the ventilation? What does that even mean? He hesitated before responding, clearly trying to find the right words. "I don't know exactly what it is, but I can tell you this, it's not accidental. Someone installed it here on purpose. And whoever did it knows this house very well." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "This is deliberate. It's designed to affect you, Mrs. Smith." I could feel the blood drain from my face. A part of me wanted to dismiss it all as some kind of mistake, but something in his tone told me this wasn't a mistake. This was something much darker. Are you saying someone's trying to hurt me? I managed to ask, my voice trembling slightly. Manuel didn't answer immediately. He looked away, his brow furrowed in concentration, before slowly nodding. It's possible, he said, his words heavy with the kind of gravity that made my heart race. The world around me seemed to slow down, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if this was my reality now. I had always felt safe in my home. I raised my children here, built a life here. Now it seemed like my sanctuary had become a prison. Who could be doing this? I whispered more to myself than to him. My mind raced through all the possibilities. My children? But no, surely not. How could they? They were my flesh and blood. They loved me. Right? Mrs. Smith, you need to listen to me, Manuel said, his voice breaking through my thoughts. This is serious. We need to get to the bottom of this before it's too late. Too late for what? I asked, my voice shaky but louder now, the reality of the situation beginning to settle in. Manuel stood up, pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. If what I think is happening here is true, you could be in danger. This system in your basement, it's not just venting air. It's connected to your bedroom's ventilation. And whatever's in there, it's not good for you. It could be affecting your health. I felt a chill run through me, my breath catching in my throat. My health? But I've been feeling tired, weak. But I thought it was just from getting older. I never thought. Manuel turned to face me, his expression grim. Ma'am, what you're describing, those symptoms, the fatigue, the headaches, the feeling like you're constantly drained, those could be the effects of whatever's in the air. And it's possible it's been happening for months. It could be poisoning you slowly. My heart pounded in my chest. Poisoning? My mind refused to fully accept the idea. How could I even begin to wrap my head around this? My children, Michael and Linda, could they be involved in this? They had both been acting strange, but this? This was beyond anything I had imagined. Manuel took a deep breath, his face softening slightly. Ma'am, I know this is hard to hear. But you need to trust me. Whoever set this up, they knew exactly what they were doing. And it's been going on for a while now. He stepped closer to me, his eyes intense. You've been feeling sick for months, haven't you? You've noticed something's not right. I nodded silently. I've been so tired, like I can never get enough rest. And the headaches, they've been worse lately. Manuel nodded, almost as if he had expected that answer. That's exactly what I'm talking about. These symptoms, they're all consistent with what I found in the basement. But we need to be sure. We need to investigate further. And most importantly, we need to get you out of this house for now. I stared at him, trying to process his words. You're telling me to leave my own home? The thought of leaving, of abandoning everything I had worked for, made my chest tighten with panic. You have to, Mrs. Smith, Manuel said, his voice firm but filled with concern. This isn't just a simple plumbing issue anymore. Someone in this house has been deliberately poisoning you. And it's not just an accident. You need to get away from here before it gets worse. I shook my head, my thoughts swirling. But how can I leave? This is my house. My life is here. My family. Manuel stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. I know this is difficult. But the truth is, you're not safe here. Not anymore. Whoever is behind this, they've been planning this for a long time. And you need to get out of here now. I swallowed hard, trying to process the magnitude of it all. Could this really be happening? Could the people I loved, the people I raised, be trying to harm me? It didn't make sense. Can you help me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What do I do now? Manuel looked at me for a long moment before nodding. First, I'll take you somewhere safe. After that, we'll figure out what to do next. But you need to trust me. You're in danger, and we can't take any chances. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, and followed him to the door. As I turned to look back at the house, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. This house, the place I had called home for decades, now felt like a foreign land. I had no idea how things had gone so wrong, so quickly. But the worst was yet to come. As we walked away from my home, I couldn't help but wonder, had I seen the signs all along? Was there something I missed? Had I been blind to the danger lurking right in front of me? Manuel and I walked down the driveway, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the soft morning light. Each step away from the house felt like a step away from everything I had known. The place that once felt like home now felt like a cage. The world outside seemed foreign, unreal. My mind kept racing back to the basement, to the device Manuel had described, the system meant to harm me. As we reached the end of the driveway, Manuel stopped and turned to face me. His eyes were filled with concern, but there was also an urgency to them, as if he knew something I didn't, something far worse than I could imagine. Mrs. Smith, I'm going to take you somewhere safe, but we need to keep moving. The more time we waste, the more likely they are to find out you're gone, he said, his voice low, as if trying not to draw attention. Do you think they'll come after me? I asked, my voice trembling. The thought of Michael and Linda coming after me, after everything I had done for them, was impossible to bear. I don't know, Manuel replied, his face tight with worry. But it's better to be cautious. They might not act right away, but once they realize you're not in the house, they could panic. You need to be as far away from them as possible. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Everything felt surreal. The betrayal of my own children, the discovery of the poisoning system, it was all too much to process. My mind kept spinning, trying to understand how things had gone so wrong, how the people I loved could be capable of such cruelty. Manuel and I drove in silence for what felt like hours, though I knew it was only a short time. The further we got from the house, the more my chest loosened, but the fear remained. I kept thinking about my children, Michael and Linda. They were my flesh and blood. How could they do something like this? How could they plan my death? Manuel glanced at me from time to time, his expression softening. He clearly understood the pain I was feeling. But I couldn't bring myself to ask him about the specifics of what he had found in the basement. I was afraid of what I might hear. We eventually arrived at a small, quiet hotel on the outskirts of town. Manuel parked the car and turned to me. I'll make sure you're safe here for the night. You can rest, gather your thoughts, and then we'll make a plan to take further action. I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. I just needed a moment to breathe. I couldn't think about anything else right now. Inside the hotel lobby, I was given a room. It was small but clean, with soft lighting and a cozy bed that seemed inviting after everything that had happened. As Manuel handed me the key, I looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, I said quietly. For everything. You don't have to thank me, Mrs. Smith, he replied, his voice gentle but firm. You're safe now. That's what matters. I closed the door behind me and sat on the bed, staring at the walls. The room felt so ordinary. How could everything have turned so quickly? The peaceful life I had built, the routine I had come to rely on, now it all felt like a distant memory. I couldn't stop thinking about the basement. About the system. About my children. The room felt too small, the air too still. I couldn't sit still. I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was really going on. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, knowing full well that I couldn't call Michael or Linda. But I needed answers. I scrolled through my contacts, finally landing on Michael's number. For a moment, I hesitated. What could I possibly say to him? How could I look him in the eye after everything that had happened? I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I needed to know the truth. And I needed it now. I pressed the dial button. The phone rang, each ring making my heart race faster. After a few moments, Michael answered. Mom? Is everything okay? His voice was distant, like it always had been lately. Michael, I said, my voice shaking, I need you to tell me the truth. What's going on? Why are you doing this to me? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him shifting in his seat. His voice was quieter now, almost like he was trying to hide something. What are you talking about, Mom? I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me, Michael, I said, feeling a surge of anger mixed with hurt. I know what you've been doing. I know about the system in the basement. I know you've been poisoning me. There was a long silence. Michael didn't speak for a few seconds, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was different now. Cold. You don't understand, Mom. You never did. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice cracking. How could you do this to me? I raised you. I loved you. You never understood, Mom, he said again, his tone flat. You were always so busy with your life, with your work, with your house. You never paid attention to what was really happening. You never paid attention to us. Michael, please, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. Please tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't do this. Tell me you didn't hurt me. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, anything to reassure me. But instead, he finally replied, It's too late, Mom. You should have listened to us when we tried to help. You never took our concerns seriously. Now it's too late. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Too late. It was too late for what? What had they done? What had Michael done? I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop myself from asking the question. What do you mean, Michael? What's going to happen now? It's already happening, Mom, he replied, his voice cold and emotionless. You were never going to get out of this house alive. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't the son I had raised. This wasn't the man I had loved. Michael, I whispered, barely able to speak, why? Money, Mom, he said simply. Money fixes everything. Money gets us out of the mess we're in. You never understood that. But now you will. The line went dead. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My own son. My flesh and blood. They had been planning this for months. It wasn't just the poisoning. It was everything. It was the money. I stood there, holding my phone, staring at the screen. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. Everything I thought I knew about my children, about my life, was a lie. The betrayal was overwhelming. But there was something else, something deeper that I couldn't ignore. They had planned this. They had planned my death. I was alone in that hotel room, but I wasn't really alone. I could still hear Michael's voice in my head. The coldness. The indifference. And Linda, too. What had she been involved in? How deep did this go? I didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear, I couldn't go back to that house. Not now. Not ever. What would I do now? What was the next step in this nightmare? I sat there in the hotel room, my phone still clutched tightly in my shaking hands, staring at the screen. The conversation with Michael echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, and I couldn't shake the image of his cold, emotionless tone. Money. That was all it took to turn my son into a stranger. Money had turned him into a monster. But there was something else in his words, something I hadn't understood fully until now. He didn't just want money. He needed it. And when I realized that, a wave of dread washed over me. What would they do now? They had already taken so much from me. My trust. My love. Would they go as far as to take my life? I looked out the window, the street lights outside casting long shadows on the pavement below. The room felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me with every passing second. I had never felt so alone. But even in the midst of this overwhelming fear, a small part of me refused to accept it. I had raised Michael and Linda. I had given them everything. No matter how far they had fallen, I couldn't believe they would go through with it. Could they? Could they really kill me for money? The sound of my phone vibrating broke through my thoughts. It was a text from Manuel. My hands were still trembling, but I quickly opened the message. Mrs. Smith, we need to talk. I have some information that could change everything. I read the message several times, trying to make sense of it. What information? What had he found? My mind raced as I quickly typed a reply. Where are you? What's going on? The response came almost instantly. Meet me at the cafe down the street. It's safer. I didn't hesitate. Grabbing my purse, I rushed out of the hotel room. The fresh night air hit me like a jolt, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside my chest. The cafe wasn't far, just a few blocks down the street. As I walked, my thoughts kept returning to Michael and Linda. How long had they been planning this? Had it all started with the renovation? Or had they been plotting even before then? The idea of my own children conspiring to murder me felt like an unbearable weight pressing down on my chest. When I arrived at the cafe, I quickly spotted Manuel sitting at a corner table. He waved me over, his face serious. As I sat down across from him, he didn't waste any time. Mrs. Smith, I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, Manuel began, his voice low. About what Michael said on the phone. And I think we need to act fast. What do you mean? I asked, my heart skipping a beat. I've been doing some digging of my own, he said, leaning forward. I went back to your house today, after you left. I needed to make sure everything was still in place. And I found something. Something I think you need to know. I felt a rush of panic, but I tried to stay calm. What did you find? I asked. Manuel's eyes flicked around the cafe, as if making sure no one was listening. It's worse than I thought, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I went into the basement again. I checked the device, the one that's connected to your ventilation system. And this time, I got a better look at it. I felt a cold chill creep down my spine. What did you see? Manuel took a deep breath. It's not just a chemical system. It's a monitoring system, too. Whoever installed it was keeping track of your health. They've been documenting your symptoms, your decline, for months. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean, documenting my decline? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would they do that? Manuel looked at me with a grim expression. Whoever installed this system wanted to make sure it was working. They needed to know exactly when the poisoning was taking effect. And they've been watching you. Watching your every move. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My mind struggled to connect the dots. They've been watching me? My own children? Why? Manuel leaned back in his chair, his gaze darkening. It's about control, Mrs. Smith. They needed to know how long it would take for you to show symptoms, when you'd start feeling sick enough to die. And they knew exactly how to time it. I felt dizzy, my vision blurring. So they've been planning this for months? Documenting everything? How could they do this to me? I raised them. I loved them. How could they? My voice trailed off, the words catching in my throat. Manuel put a hand on mine, his grip firm. I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith. But this isn't something you can ignore anymore. You're in real danger. If we don't act now, it's only going to get worse. I nodded, my mind racing. I had to leave. I had to get out of this nightmare. But how? What could I do to protect myself from my own children? What should I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Manuel sat up straighter, his eyes intense. I think it's time we go to the authorities. We need to get solid evidence, and we need to do it quickly. I'll take you back to your house, and we'll gather what we can. But we have to be careful. They know you're on to them now. They'll do whatever it takes to cover their tracks. I felt a surge of fear, but I knew he was right. How do we get the evidence? I asked, my hands shaking. Manuel hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I'll go back to your house this afternoon. I'll tell them I need to check for any remaining issues. While I'm there, I'll document everything. I'll take photos of the device, take samples of the chemicals if I can, and get whatever evidence we need to show the police. I nodded, feeling both relieved and terrified at the same time. But what if they're already on to me? What if they've figured out that I know? Manuel's expression hardened. That's why we need to move fast. The more time we waste, the more likely it is they'll destroy the evidence. We need to act now, before they can cover their tracks. I felt a knot form in my stomach. But I knew Manuel was right. The clock was ticking. As I left the cafe, my mind was clouded with 1,000 thoughts. I could hardly believe what had just been revealed. My children, my own flesh and blood, had been systematically poisoning me. They had been plotting my death for months. Manuel and I returned to the hotel, and the rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept replaying the conversation with Michael in my mind, the coldness in his voice, the way he had dismissed everything I had said. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They wanted my life, my money, and they were willing to destroy everything to get it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The weight of everything felt suffocating. My own children had turned into strangers. Strangers who were willing to kill me for their own gain. As the hours passed, I realized there was no going back. I couldn't stay in the house. I couldn't trust anyone. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going down without a fight. Tomorrow, I would take action. I would gather the evidence. I would expose the truth. And I would make sure my children paid for what they had done to me. But as I lay there in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Something I hadn't yet anticipated. And I had no idea how much danger I was truly in. The days after I learned the truth felt like a whirlwind. Everything was moving too fast. Manuel and I were planning, scheming, and preparing for the final confrontation with Michael and Linda. It was a game now, a deadly, dangerous game, but one I couldn't afford to lose. I had no idea how deep their plan went, how much they were willing to sacrifice to get what they wanted, or what kind of person they had become in the process. The clock was ticking, and I knew every minute brought me closer to either the end or the beginning of a new chapter. I couldn't stop thinking about the system Manuel had found, the device in my basement, connected to the ventilation system, a system designed to slowly poison me. I shuddered at the thought of how close I had come to losing my life, without even knowing it. But now, with Manuel by my side, I felt a strange sense of determination. I wasn't going to let my children get away with this. I was going to take action, and I was going to make sure they paid for what they had done. The plan was simple. We needed to gather evidence, solid, irrefutable evidence, before going to the authorities. If we could get everything documented, if we could prove what they had done, then we had a chance to stop them before it was too late. But the danger was real. Michael and Linda knew I was on to them. They were watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had barely slept in the past few days, my mind racing with thoughts of what could happen. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about what was really going on. I had lived in the house for decades, but I had never noticed the signs, never questioned the things I should have questioned. How had they been planning this for so long? And how had I been so blind? Manuel had been my rock throughout this ordeal. He had seen things I couldn't even begin to imagine, and he was doing everything in his power to help me. He wasn't just a plumber. He was my ally, my protector, and my guide through this nightmare. It was early morning when we returned to my house. I had insisted on going with him. This was my home, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me without a fight. We parked down the street, out of sight, and walked toward the house quietly. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the houses still dark, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Manuel had a plan. He was going to go inside first, under the pretext of checking for any lingering issues with the plumbing. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention, so I would stay out of sight, hidden, watching, waiting. This was the moment of truth. I had never been so scared in my life. I could feel the tension building in my chest as we approached the house. My heart was pounding in my ears, my palms slick with sweat. But there was no turning back now. I had to do this. For me. For my safety. For my future. Manuel entered the house first. I stayed behind, my eyes scanning the street for any sign of Michael or Linda. My mind raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. The house was silent, and I could hear the faint sounds of Manuel moving around inside. Time seemed to stretch, and every second felt like an eternity. I glanced at my phone. No messages. No calls. Was this a good sign, or were they already on to me? I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The silence was oppressive, and I could hear the distant hum of the neighborhood, nothing out of the ordinary. But my senses were on high alert. My heart beat faster as I wondered what was happening inside. Then, the door opened. It was Manuel, signaling me to come inside. His face was serious, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "Are they here?" I asked quietly as I stepped inside, my voice barely above a whisper. "No," he replied, his voice calm but urgent. "But we don't have much time. They could show up any minute. We need to be quick." I nodded, my stomach turning. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and waiting for. Manuel led me to the basement door, and I followed him down the familiar stairs. The basement, once a place where I stored old boxes and seasonal decorations, now felt like a dark, oppressive dungeon. My breath caught as we reached the corner of the room where the device had been. I could see it clearly now, still there, tucked between the pipes, the plastic tubes running like veins through the wall. It looked so innocent at first glance, but I knew what it was capable of. This is it, Manuel said, taking a deep breath. This is the system they've been using to poison you. I've already taken pictures, but we need more. We need samples. I nodded, my mind racing. I couldn't believe I was standing in front of the device that had been slowly destroying me. How long had it been running? How long had I been breathing in whatever chemicals it had been releasing? Manuel was careful, methodical, as he began taking samples from the device. He took out a small container and carefully extracted some of the liquid from the tubes, sealing it in the container. This will be enough, he said, looking at the container with a grim expression. I watched him work, my heart heavy with the weight of what was happening. This was real. It wasn't just a nightmare. It wasn't something I could wake up from. This was my life now. And it was slipping away, piece by piece. Manuel took several more photos of the system, the tubes, the timers, anything that could serve as evidence. I kept my eyes on the door, feeling the growing sense of unease in my chest. I didn't know how long we had before Michael and Linda would realize what was happening. Let's go, Manuel said suddenly, his voice sharp. We've got what we need. We hurried back upstairs, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. But we had done it. We had gathered the evidence. We had everything we needed to expose Michael and Linda for what they were. But now, we had to make the next move. We left the house quickly, not looking back. The street was still empty, the houses still dark. But as we walked to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house. The house that had been my home for so many years. The house where I had raised my children, where I had laughed, cried, and built my life. And now it felt like a distant memory. A place I could never return to. As we neared the police station, I knew what I had to do. The truth was out there. The evidence was in our hands. But the real battle was just beginning. As we neared the police station, my pulse quickened. I could feel the weight of the evidence in the bag between us, the small vial of liquid and the photos, each one more damning than the last. I knew that once this was in the hands of the authorities, my life would change forever. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was certain of one thing: I wasn't going back to that house. Manuel's eyes flicked to me as he drove. We're almost there, he said, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. He had been the steady one throughout this whole ordeal, and now it was my turn to take the final step. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I hadn't felt this terrified in years, not since the day my husband passed away. But this was different. This wasn't about loss, this was about survival. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could see the police station looming in front of us, cold, sterile, and intimidating. The doors felt miles away, but I knew we had to go through with this. There was no turning back. The truth needed to be exposed, and Michael and Linda needed to be held accountable for what they had done. Manuel parked the car and turned to me. We'll go in together. You'll be fine. I nodded, though inside I was anything but fine. I was terrified. But I was also determined. We walked into the police station, and I was immediately struck by how quiet it was. The officers at the desk looked up as we approached, and Manuel spoke first. "We need to speak with someone about a serious matter," he said, his voice firm. "We have evidence of attempted murder." The officer raised an eyebrow but gestured for us to take a seat. After what felt like an eternity, a detective appeared, a tall man in his 40s with a sharp gaze and a no-nonsense attitude. He introduced himself as Detective Harris and motioned for us to follow him into an interrogation room. Once inside, I set the bag down on the table, feeling the weight of it like a brick in my chest. "We have evidence of a crime that has been committed in my home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Detective Harris glanced at the bag, his brow furrowed. "What kind of evidence are we talking about?" Manuel stepped forward, opening the bag carefully and laying out the photos and the vial of liquid. "This is a chemical substance that has been systematically released into Mrs. Smith's home. It's connected to her ventilation system, and it has been poisoning her for months." Detective Harris didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the photos and then at the vial. His silence was deafening, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He understood the gravity of what we were presenting. He started, trailing off as he shook his head. "Are you telling me that your own children did this to you?" The question hung in the air, and I felt my stomach drop. It was one thing to know the truth, it was another to hear it out loud. To have it spoken in such a cold, clinical way. "Yes," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "My children did this. They planned it. They poisoned me slowly so they could inherit my money." Detective Harris's expression hardened as he looked from the photos to the vial and then back at me. "We need to get this evidence to the lab immediately. This is a serious case." "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "But there's more. They've been monitoring me. Documenting my symptoms. They've been watching me suffer while planning my death." Manuel spoke up then. "We have a log, a handwritten log, from Linda's room. It details every symptom Mrs. Smith has experienced, along with dates and notes on how to adjust the chemical doses." Detective Harris nodded. "I'll get that to the lab as well. This is beyond anything I've seen. This isn't just poisoning, it's premeditated murder." I felt the air in the room grow heavy. The weight of it all was crushing. But I knew that now, finally, the truth was out. And it was going to change everything. But even as the evidence was being collected, my mind was still racing. My children. I had spent my life protecting them, loving them, and now they were the ones who had tried to destroy me. How had I missed the signs? Detective Harris left the room to make the necessary arrangements, and I sat there in silence, staring at the table, my hands trembling. Manuel sat beside me, his presence a quiet comfort, but even his calm demeanor couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief that hung over me. "You did the right thing," Manuel said quietly, his voice reassuring. "You've survived this, and now they'll face the consequences." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. What did survival mean if the people you trusted the most were the ones trying to take it all away from you? How could I ever trust anyone again? The door to the interrogation room opened, and Detective Harris walked in with a serious expression. "We're going to need your full statement, Mrs. Smith," he said. "But I need you to know this isn't over. We're going to arrest your children, but this is just the beginning of the investigation. There may be more people involved." I nodded, my mind spinning. More people involved? What did that even mean? Could it be that Michael and Linda weren't acting alone? Had they been influenced by someone else? The questions were endless, and I didn't have the answers. But as Detective Harris began taking my statement, I realized something. No matter how deep this ran, no matter how many people were involved, I had survived. I had lived through the worst. And now, I was going to make sure that Michael and Linda couldn't hurt anyone else. As the detective took my statement, I knew that I had finally taken control of my life again. The nightmare wasn't over, it had just begun. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. After what felt like hours, I left the police station, my head spinning. I had given my statement, provided all the evidence we had gathered, and now it was up to the authorities to take it from here. But the journey wasn't over yet. There would be trials, there would be questions, and there would be more pain before this was all behind me. But I would face it head on. I climbed into the car with Manuel, the silence between us heavy. I couldn't find the words to express what I was feeling: relief, anger, betrayal, fear. They all swirled inside me, each one more overwhelming than the last. As we drove away from the police station, I looked back at the city. The place I had called home for so many years. The place where everything had fallen apart. But it was also the place where I had found my strength. I had survived. And that was all that mattered now. I had lived through the worst, and I would make sure the truth was heard. I would make sure justice was served. As the sun set on everything I thought I knew, I was left standing in the ruins of a life I had built with love and trust, only to see it torn apart by betrayal. But through the darkest moments, I found the strength to survive. I took back control, and I took the first steps toward justice. And no matter what lies ahead, I know one thing for sure: I will never let my guard down again. Remember, the people closest to us can sometimes hide the darkest secrets. But when the truth comes to light, there is always hope for redemption. My journey isn't over, and neither is yours. Sometimes, survival is the only victory. If you've learned something from my story, or if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't know who to trust? Let's talk about it. And remember, you're not alone. Stay strong. Stay vigilant. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.